I don't want to cover all the provinces of Canada. It gets a little redundant, and we have so much to cover. But the three territories of Canada, remember, 10 provinces, three territories. The territories are the traditional owners, or the Native Americans, as we might know them, or as Canada calls them, First Nations. I think that's more of a kinder term, a less racist term. But they talk about now there are several pronunciations. They use a different pronunciation of the Native American tribes, but we call them the Inuit tribes, which are up in the Northwestern Territories. Anyway, I want to read you a little something. There's a very interesting bit that your book points out on page 52 that I didn't realize, which means that the Canadian indigenous people were fared far better under Canadian rule than the U.S. Native Americans. In other words, the Canadian indigenous people have a tremendous amount of land, although it's very cold and barren. Only 2,200, I think, exist. 22,000, excuse me, are populated on an acreage of half of Canada. So far north in the tundra, what we would used to call Eskimo, but they're various tribes. So they got along with the federal government of Canada. Remember, America and Canada are both federations. In a federation, you'll see on page 40 of your book, in a federal state, and I'm quoting, power is shared between a country's central government and its highest-ranking political subdivisions. The Canadians call these first-order subdivisions provinces, whereas in the United States, they are the countries, as the country's name implies, states. So shared power between a central government and its first-order political power, which would, the book's way of saying, provinces in Canada or states. So the native peoples got along real well in the native states, in their territories. So unlike the United States, which shoved the Indians in about 300 tribes in small, desolate reservations, the Inuits had always lived in the Northwestern Territories or the Northern Territories, and were accustomed throughout thousands of years. That was their home, and they were basically left alone. They had their own language, they had their own writing, they had their own traditions. So the federal government of Canada wisely left them alone. And on page 52, I'd like you to take a peek at this one couple paragraphs under regionalism and ethnicity in the United States. In Canada, Indigenous peoples were able to hold on to sparsely populated areas in the north. In contrast, in the United States, the relentless push westward by European settlers and the U.S. government, in effect, dispossessed and decimated the original inhabitants. Canada didn't have this great land grab like the United States had. So, as noted earlier, there are fewer than 3 million Native Americans left today, with the Navajo and Cherokee being the largest surviving nations. And we should feel very strongly about the Cherokee, as they inhabited this part of the United States until they were moved out by Andrew Jackson in the 1830s. Okay, the book continues. Whereas in Canada, First Nations hold significant territorial power, in the United States, Native Americans are in a far weaker position to challenge the federal government. That's really a great point the book puts out. I just love this point, something you don't get anywhere else, and that will come up as probably a assignment for the week. Let me chew on it. All right, let's go ahead and watch these guys talk about the territory, shall we?
Kind of known as the Tornado Alley of Canada.
I don't know. I feel like Saskatchewan is kind of like the place where you would go to like run from the law, cornfields. Nobody's going to want to go all the way to Saskatchewan to catch you. I mean, come on. What do you think about Saskatchewan people?
They're probably nice. I've never actually met anyone from Saskatchewan. I assume there's some nice country folk.
Running from the law.
And now we reach the territories. Together they only have a combined population of less than 200,000.
All three of them. Yeah, it's like really hard to live here. It's like super cold like most of the year, and it lies on the barren Canadian Canadian Shield.
Yeah, most of the people who are out there are either there for the mining industry or they're the native people who live there.
So, here they are. The Northwest Territories, capital, Yellowknife.
It is Canada's last frontier and polar bear land.
Fun fact, they have 11 official languages, 9 in addition to English and French. Most of them are from various native tribes like the Cree, the Slavey, the Chippewa, or the Gwich'in, and like a ton of others.
And it has the largest non-shared lake, also known as Great Slave Lake, and named after the Slavey people.
Not slaves, Slavey, it's a tribe. Also known as the Dene people, which are actually the ancestors of the Navajo, which live in Arizona. See how we get like a lot of, there's so much connection between these two land masses, you know? It's just like we take your people.
That comes out wrong. We take your people from your land.
Yeah, we kidnap Canadians.
Nunavut, capital Iqaluit.
That's how you pronounce it. None of it, right? Not wrong.
I mean, that's how I pronounce it.
Land of the Midnight Sun.
Probably the most isolated and obscure territory, as there are no roads that connect to it directly from the rest of Canada. So you can only fly or sail.
This is actually the newest addition to the Confederation of Canada. It actually split off from the Northwest Territories back in 1999. This territory is predominantly inhabited by the native Inuktitut and Inuinnaqtun peoples. They actually have their own writing system. It's pretty cool. You can see it on like street signs. And yeah, they just got their own like traditions and customs and stuff like that. It's yeah, really interesting.
And it also holds Paul's favorite island that he's affectionately named Pancake Island.
It's the island inside the lake, inside the island, inside the lake, inside of Victoria Island. It's yeah, I want to go there someday. And finally, the last one, Yukon, sometimes referred to as the Yukon, capital Whitehorse.
It is the least populated of all the territories. It is also known as the Gold Rush Territory, known for the Klondike Gold Rush, and also the westernmost territory bordering Alaska.
It also has Mount Logan, Canada's tallest mountain.
It's kind of like Alaska's girlfriend. So many people cross the border, and yeah.
Yeah, they're just like, you gotta have Alaska and Yukon working together. They're just right next to each other. And that is it! All the 13 provinces and territories of Canada. High five!
Okay, I thought that was pretty good. They did a fairly good job, rushed it through, but I liked it, and so we'll move on to something else right quick. Now back to PowerPoint, because it's a good organization of what the defining the realm is. There's certain things I can explain as we go along, but there's two terms in here that might need a little examples. One is the rain shadow effect, and the other is gentrification. Okay, these need a little talking about. So let's talk about them before we get into the whole meat of the North American realm, because it will come up. Trust me. Let me stop it for a second. Okay, rain shadow effect. That's a physiographic part of the U.S. and Canada. What is a rain shadow effect? Up in Oregon or Washington State, you have mountains coming off the Pacific. Let's use this. So you have the cold wind hits the mountain chain. It rises, gets warmer, it expands, and as it expands, it drops rain. And then after it drops its rain, it starts to wait a minute. Excuse me. It's cold wind. Let me back up. Even I, sometimes this late at night, 9:54, I make mistakes, but not this time. Okay, you got cold weather, and as it's rising, it gets colder. And remember, warm air holds more moisture than cold air. So the colder it gets, it drops the rain on this side of the mountain facing the ocean, and then it goes over the mountain and it starts going downhill. And as it falls, as the air heats up as it goes downhill, but there's no moisture left, so it comes in as hot, dry air. And that's basically rain shadow effect. So in other words, think of the mountain, cold going up, dropping rain, warm coming down, hot, dry air. That's rain shadow. Another term, gentrification, which comes up in the book, is it's talking about the middle class way back when, and the middle class in the North American realm now, which is not doing as great as it was. And gentrification basically is moving people out of the homes that they live in because they can't afford to move them. They can't afford to live there anymore. So I defined it. I did a thesis on it. One of the top theses at Georgia State that's downloaded. It's almost downloaded 2,000 times. all over the world. It's used in some classes in the London College, in the constitutional law class. I think it's the University of London College, something weird. I got a little email from one of the students that wanted me to explain the thesis for him. So anyway, so here's the definition. It's defined as the influx of a wealthier class of residents buying into an area of lower income residents. This movement results in higher property values, which in turn can cause higher property taxes and higher rent. The higher cost of living soon becomes a large burden on the area's lower income residents, which can result in the displacement. Gentrification is displacement of the lower income group. In other words, gentrification is nothing more or less than the neighborhood expression of class inequality. Loretta Lees, a very good sociologist and geographer, wrote a book on that, and she's kind of a hero of mine. So I did a case study in South Atlanta about gentrification, about the wealthier developers moving in and displacing the African American working class that already had homes there for generations, and what happens with that. And so just kind of give you an overall idea of what gentrification is. All right, let me pause for a second. Okay, we're back to PowerPoint, and you can read what it's here. So we're going to talk about the physiographic, the continentality, rain shadow effect. You can read it. It's right there. It's in your PowerPoint. You want to go look at it. It's like the 4th page down. It gives you kind of in a nutshell of what the definitions of the realm, the North American realm, are. And we'll go ahead and knock them out and talk about them. So let's start. And this is back in PowerPoint. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, but it works really well in this chapter. So we're going to kind of stay there for a little bit. And on page 5 of the PowerPoint, it talks about the Mexican percent of U.S. population of Mexican origin by county. And this is a map called a choropleth map, CHOROPLETH. Might talk about that a little later on. It's showing data, average data. This is all it is, just data, like average data. It starts out at 0 to 5%, 5 to 10%, 10 to 20, 20, 30, 30, 40, over 40%. So it's a percentage, or it's an average, or it's what we call aggregated data. And it's just basically showing Hispanic population or Hispanic origin, and that's kind of cool. It's a good map, so don't sweat it, don't worry about it, but it's called a choropleth map. It does talk about we are both federal states. Remember, I define what a federation is. We're a very highly mobilized and mobile society, urbanized. As compared to the rest of the world, we have high incomes, basically, and high rates of consumption. We have great manufacturing complexes. It goes on, chief trading partners, U.S., Mexico, and actually they should have put in U.S. and Canada too. I don't know why they didn't. But anyway, that just gives you kind of a nutshell of what's going on there. Now, in that film on Canada that we talked about, he said within 100 miles of the U.S. border, major concentration of population, the east-west corridor. That's what they're talking about here. So they say in the PowerPoint and in your book, it's about 200 miles as far as Canada is concerned. Of the U.S. border is the largest population of Canadians, within 200. I think that YouTube had 100 miles. But as far as we're concerned, the highest concentration of populations is along the East Coast and along the West Coast. That's our highest population. And what we have over here is called flyover states. See that? There's not much out there population-wise as compared to. Now, remember, when I say not much out there, population, as compared to the East or West Coast, there's not much out there, but there is a good bit of population. It's just a lot sparser than it is between the two coasts.